What happens when a president can decide who deserves protection and who does not? That is the question shaking Washington right now. Kamala Harris, former Vice President of the United States, has just lost her Secret Service detail. According to the Associated Press, President Trump signed a presidential memorandum revoking the extended protection that Joe Biden had granted her after leaving office. This is not just about one person's safety. It is about power, precedent, and politics. In the next few minutes, we will explore why this decision matters, what the law actually says, and how the line between security and politics may be far thinner than Americans ever realized. Stay with us, because the implications of this move could reach far beyond Harris herself. To understand the story, we need to know how Secret Service protection really works. The United States Secret Service is responsible for guarding presidents, vice presidents, and their families. It also protects visiting world leaders and helps investigate financial crimes. But when it comes to protection after leaving office, the rules are not the same for everyone. Former presidents receive Secret Service protection for life. Former vice presidents, on the other hand, only receive it for 6 months. That limit can be extended, but only if the sitting president decides to grant it. According to ABC News, President Biden did just that in 2021, when he extended Harris's protection beyond the 6 months, pushing it all the way to 2026. Biden argued that Harris remained a high-profile national figure and could be a target. This week, President Trump revoked that extension. The result is that Kamala Harris, at the very moment she is re-entering the national spotlight with a new memoir and a nationwide book tour, will no longer be guarded by federal agents. The timing is striking, and the move is raising questions across the country. So what exactly happened? As reported by Politico, President Trump issued a presidential memorandum that rescinds the extension of protection granted by Biden. That means Harris now falls back to the standard rule: 6 months of coverage after leaving office. Her security ended abruptly. This decision is unusual because former vice presidents almost always fade from public attention quietly. Harris is not. She is still a major political figure. According to The Guardian, she has been preparing for a series of public events to promote her memoir and reconnect with Democratic donors. The removal of protection now means she will have to rely on private security or local police coordination. No official explanation was given in the memo. That silence fuels speculation. Why now? Why Harris? Was it about cost, precedent, or politics? These questions hang over Washington like a storm cloud, and they lead us to the next crucial piece of the puzzle. If this is legally allowed, what exactly does the law say, and how much discretion does a president really have? According to the U.S. Secret Service statute, the difference between presidents and vice presidents is intentional. Former presidents are granted lifetime protection, partly to safeguard their symbolic role, even after leaving office. Former vice presidents receive only 6 months, based on the assumption that their national profile fades faster. But the law allows the sitting president to extend that protection in extraordinary cases. Biden did so for Harris, citing her unique visibility as the first woman and first woman of color to serve as vice president. Trump has now revoked that extension. Legally, he has the authority. There is no independent board, no bipartisan commission, no congressional approval required. This is pure presidential discretion. As Reuters notes, that discretion has rarely been used to revoke protection once granted. That makes this case significant, not because the law is unclear, but because the political context is explosive. If the president can legally grant or revoke protection, why is this decision causing such an uproar in the political arena? Here is where the story becomes more than a technicality. Kamala Harris is not just a former vice president, quietly retiring into private life. She is a national figure, still in the spotlight, and potentially a future contender for the presidency. That is why this decision to revoke her protection feels different. According to The Guardian, critics argue that the move is not about rules or costs, but about sending a message. The message is simple. Even your safety can depend on politics. This is what we could call the politics of protection. In theory, Secret Service protection is nonpartisan, a neutral shield that defends leaders not for who they are, but for what they represent. Threats against them are treated as threats against democracy itself. But when that shield is given or taken away based on presidential discretion, it becomes fragile. It becomes what we might call the fragile shield, a protection that can be bent, reshaped, or even removed depending on political winds. And this is not the first time security has intersected with politics. Think back to the 1990s. Former Vice President Dan Quayle received the standard 6 months of protection after leaving office. But when he briefly considered running again, there were debates in Washington about whether he needed more. In the end, politics decided that the answer was no. In the case of Al Gore, who remained an international climate figure after 2000, his protection expired despite his continued global profile. Again, the line between politics and security was blurry. The United States is not alone in this. In Israel, for example, protection for former prime ministers is often a matter of political debate. When Benjamin Netanyahu left office in 2021, his security detail was scaled back quickly, sparking outrage among his supporters who said political rivals wanted to humiliate him. In South Korea, former presidents have sometimes lost or gained security based on their relationships with the new administration. Around the world, protection is rarely just about neutral risk assessment. It often becomes a proxy for political power. That is why Harris's case resonates. She is not just any public figure. She is someone who still draws massive crowds, who has faced credible threats in the past, and who symbolizes a historic breakthrough as the first woman of color to serve as vice president. Removing her protection now, at the very moment she is visible again, sends a signal that safety itself can be conditional. Imagine the effect on future leaders. If you are considering running against a president, will you have to wonder whether your security will be maintained? If you criticize those in power, could your protection be cut short? This is the domino effect of deterrence. Once security is politicized, it does not only affect the person in question, it affects everyone watching. It creates fear, hesitation, and doubt. And that hesitation can silence voices before they even speak. First comes the shock, then comes the silence, and that silence is where danger grows. If the shield of protection is fragile, if it can be reshaped by politics, then what stops it from becoming a weapon? Losing Secret Service protection is not just symbolic. It changes the logistics of every public appearance. According to CNN, the Secret Service provides more than bodyguards. It coordinates with local police, sweeps venues for threats, and monitors communications for potential danger. Without that infrastructure, Harris will have to hire private security firms. These companies can provide trained personnel, but they do not have access to federal intelligence or coordination networks. That means higher costs and potentially higher risks. Imagine Harris walking into a crowded bookstore for a signing event. With Secret Service, the entire block would be locked down, with agents on rooftops and command centers monitoring every movement. With private security, the scale is smaller, the resources more limited, and the margin for error wider. According to Al Jazeera, Harris has already faced threats in the past, as do many women and people of color in public office. Removing her protection now does not just expose her. It raises concerns about whether the nation is willing to keep politics separate from basic safety. If this can happen to a former vice president, could it also happen to other high-profile figures in the future? Let's pause for a moment. Harris's security has been cut. The law allows it. Trump made the decision. But this is not just a legal question. It is a political earthquake. Protection that was once treated as automatic and neutral now looks conditional and partisan. This is what we might call the fragile shield of American politics. A shield that can be lifted or lowered at the whim of whoever sits in the Oval Office. That is why the outrage is spreading, and why the debate is only beginning. So what happens now? The revocation of Kamala Harris's Secret Service protection is not the end of the story. In fact, it may only be the beginning. According to ABC News, members of Congress are already discussing whether there should be clearer rules to prevent this kind of sudden change. Expect hearings, testimonies, and expert panels in the coming weeks. Lawmakers will want to know whether presidential discretion should remain unchecked, or if Congress should create a bipartisan commission to decide who qualifies for extended protection. That would shift power away from the Oval Office and toward an independent body, reducing the risk of political influence. Think tanks and advocacy groups are also likely to enter the debate. The Brookings Institution and the Heritage Foundation, usually at odds, may both see a reason to weigh in, albeit from different angles. One side may argue that unchecked discretion creates instability, while the other could frame it as a matter of presidential authority and fiscal responsibility. The conversation will not just be legal, it will be symbolic. Should security be seen as a guarantee of democracy or as a privilege granted by those in power? The media will amplify the story. According to the New York Times, Harris's book tour was already drawing coverage, and now the narrative will be inseparable from the question of her safety. Every event, every appearance, will come with a new layer of suspense. Will she be safe? Who will protect her? And if something goes wrong, who will be held responsible? This is the kind of tension that the press will not let go of easily. But the biggest risk lies in what we might call the precedent effect. Once one president has used discretion to revoke security from a political rival, the path is open for others to do the same. Imagine a future in which every new administration re-examines the security of its opponents, deciding not based on risk, but on rivalry. A Democrat could strip protection from a Republican critic. A Republican could do the same to a Democrat. The shield becomes a sword, and the cycle continues. This is the danger of normalization. The first time it happens, it feels shocking. The second time, it feels political. The third time, it feels routine. And once it feels routine, the fragile shield of protection has already shattered. For Harris, the immediate future is practical. Private security firms, local police partnerships, and higher costs. But for America, the future is conceptual. How do you keep the line between security and politics intact once it has been crossed? And who will draw that line? The president, the Congress, or the people themselves? Let's connect the dots. Legally, Trump had the right to revoke Harris's protection. Practically, it exposes her during a time of renewed visibility. Politically, it creates a precedent that could reshape how Americans see the balance between safety and power. This is not just about Harris. It is about the principle that protection, once politicized, can become a tool rather than a shield. And once that line is crossed, it is hard to go back. So here's the big question. Do you believe security for former leaders should depend on presidential discretion? Or should there be clear, nonpartisan rules that apply to everyone? If one president can extend protection and another can take it away, what does that mean for trust in the system designed to safeguard democracy? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this debate is not just about one person. It is about the invisible shield that protects the institutions themselves. And if that shield cracks, the consequences will echo far beyond one tour or one book. Make sure you subscribe to Capitol Chronicle, because in the weeks ahead we will track how this story develops, who speaks out, and whether Congress takes action. Stay tuned, because when security becomes political, the stakes could not be higher.